Alright guys, Mr. Johnson here with a video on how to soften skin, enhance eyes, and do all kinds of fun stuff to make our photos look better. Let's get started. We're going to record an action for this first part, the skin softening. So if you can't see your actions palette, go ahead and go to Window. Make sure Actions is checked right here. And there we go. Here's our action. I'm going to go ahead and create a new action by clicking the New Action button here in the bottom right-hand corner of the Actions palette. This box is going to pop up. I'm going to call it number 1, Skin Soften, because this is action number 1 of the process that we're going to record. So I'm going to go ahead and press record on this bad boy. And we are now recording our action, so let's be careful. Anything we do, Photoshop's going to record, so we have to make sure let's not make any mistakes. Let's start by duplicating our background layer by pressing Ctrl-J on our keyboard to duplicate the background layer. Then we're going to come here to Normal at the top of our Layers palette. This is called the Layer Blending mode. We're going to change that to Overlay. We should get this kind of funky looking image. That's okay. Now let's go to Filter, Other, and choose High Pass. And for the photos that we're using, 10 pixels is about the right number to have in this box. Go ahead and just press OK. And now we want to invert the selection. We want to make it go from this sharp looking thing to a nice soft thing. So let's go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, or just press Control-I. You can see it's that kind of softened the skin, but the problem is it softened everything. And we don't want that. So let's add an opposite layer mask, meaning let's add a layer mask that's already filled with black. To do that, we're going to hold down Alt when we create our layer mask. And that gives us a layer mask that's already filled with black. Awesome. And then normally we do our layer masking right now, but we're not going to since we're recording an action. So let's skip that step. We'll come back to it later. Let's go ahead and just lower the opacity of layer 1 from 100% down to about 60%. And we can change this later if we want to. And then the last thing I want to do, the last step I want to make in this action, is I want to set my foreground color to white, since that's the color I'm going to have to use first anyways. So I'm going to do that by just pressing D on my keyboard, and that'll set this box right here to white. And that's the color I'm going to want to start with. Okay, we are done with our action. We don't want to record anything else, so let's go ahead and press Stop on the Actions palette. Now let's grab our brush tool with a nice big soft edge. Make sure my hardness is about 0 by pressing Shift in the left bracket key about 5 times. I'm going to go ahead and just paint in all the skin. You can see how that's softening up the skin for us, giving that nice soft look that we like. The problem is it also softened the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and we actually want those to retain their hard edge. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to black by pressing X on my keyboard. Make my brush a little bit smaller using the bracket keys, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the eyes back. And watch what this does. It takes it from that softness, it brings back that detail, that nice sharp edge in the eyes that we like. I'm going to grab right here on the tip of the nose, and then I'm going to get the lips too to make those nice and sharp. Let's look at our before and after here. You can see it's very subtle. It's not removing all of the blemishes for us, but it is doing a very good job of softening the skin. And that's it. That's all we do for skin softening. So let's move on to step number 2. Which is we're actually going to create a new action, because if we try to do any retouching on this layer, this is a pretty funky layer that's got some funky stuff into it. And if we try to clone stamp things out, it's not going to work. So what we need is a new layer above this layer that contains everything that's on these 2 layers. It's kind of a tricky keyboard shortcut. It's Control, Shift, Alt, E. So let's make that into a new action for us. So I'm going to go ahead and just collapse that one, make a new action, and call it number 2. Retouch. And it's recording again, so let's be careful. I'm going to go ahead and press my crazy keyboard shortcut, Control Shift Alt E, and that mashed these 2 layers together and then put it on top. And let's rename this layer. So go ahead and just double click right here where it says layer 2. Make sure you get right on the words. If you double click anywhere else, it won't work. Double click right where it says layer 2. Let's rename this to Retouch, since that's where our retouching is going to happen. And then let's go ahead and add a hue saturation adjustment layer, since we're going to need that later. And then let's add a levels adjustment layer, because we're going to need that layer as well. And then the last step, I want to record this. I want to select the retouch layer, because that's going to get me ready to start doing my retouching. All right, I'm done with action number 2, so let's go ahead and press stop, and we are good to go. Now I've got a layer here that I can start doing my retouching on. So if I've got some blemishes that I want to get rid of, let's say she asked to have this guy gone, well, let's just get rid of him. Using the old patch tool is my favorite tool for retouching. She doesn't really have any bags under the eyes to get rid of, and her skin's actually pretty soft already, so we don't need to do a whole lot of retouching. But if we did, now is the time to do it. Now is the time where you want to go in, remove any blemishes that don't belong, fix anything. If she's got any crazy hairs coming out, we could clone stamp those out. Any blemishes on the face or the bags under the eyes, we could take those out at this time. So there you go. We're good to go. We are ready to move on and do the eyes. Okay, so we've fixed everything we want to fix here on the retouch layer. We've taken out all the blemishes, pock marks, anything on the face that we don't want there. We've taken it out on the retouch layer, and we're now ready to make a new layer so that we can work on the eyes. So with the retouch layer selected, let's go ahead and make a new action. Let's go ahead, let's make a new action. Let's call it number 3, eyes, and press record. And we want to make sure that with the action running that we select this retouch layer. So go ahead and just click on layer 1 and then click on retouch. And all that does is tell Photoshop to make sure you're on the retouch layer. And then let's go ahead and do Control-Shift-Alt-E again. And then we're going to double click right here on layer 2. And we're going to call this eyes. Okay, so now let's get started on the eyes. Actually, let's hit stop on our action. We don't want to record any more than just this. So go ahead and press stop. All right, so for the eyes, we're going to be using all of the tools under this right here. Yours probably looks like this. It's the dodge tool, the burn tool, and the sponge tool. Let's go ahead and get started with the dodge tool. The dodge tool is what we use for lightening things. If we want to make things brighter or lighter, that's the dodge tool's job. The dodge tool and the brush tool, or excuse me, the sponge tool and the burn tool are all brushes, meaning you can change the size of them by using the bracket keys and the softness of them by using shift and the bracket keys. We're going to start by zooming in close here, and what we're going to do is we're going to lighten up this white part of the eye. So let's grab our dodge tool. We're going to set the range up here at the top to midtones. What this tells Photoshop is saying, hey, only brighten things that are kind of bright, kind of dark. Don't lighten anything that's really dark or really bright. Just do stuff that's in the middle. And that's exactly what we want. So we want our midtones. We want our exposure to be really low, probably around 8% is good. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to make our brush a little bit smaller. And we're going to just go over the white parts of the eye. And all we're doing is just lightening him up just a smidge. We don't want to do too much. That's why we put our exposure way down to 8%. Because we don't want it to start looking fake. Let's come over here and do the same thing on the other eye. I got my dodge tool going. I've got my range set to midtones. I've got my exposure set to 8%. And all I've done here is just lighten up the white parts of the eye a little bit. Very good. Now, some people will have a lot of red lines in their eyes, especially if they were up late the night before. So we want to take those out. This young lady doesn't really have that many. She's got a few right here. But I'm going to show you how to do it anyways. Go ahead and press and hold on this little tool right here. And we're going to choose the sponge tool this time. Come up here to the top of your screen, change the mode from saturate to desaturate. Set your flow to about 20%, and then make sure vibrance is unchecked. Dirty Photoshop, if you're using an older version like I am, every time I reopen Photoshop, it's going to check the vibrance box for me. So you got to be careful. Every time you open Photoshop to start working on photos, you're going to have to uncheck vibrance. It's very annoying. So here we go. With my sponge tool selected, set to desaturate 20%. I'm ready to go. I'm going to come in, and what this is going to do is it's just going to take the color out of the white part of the eyes, and I'm okay with that because it's just white anyways. So you want to be careful. Don't get into this part of the eye. We don't want to lose any of that color, but I do want to lose these red lines that are in the eye. I don't want to get rid of the lines entirely because then we start to look unnatural. But by taking the color out of this white part, I make it look just a little bit better. All right, there you go. That's pretty much it so far. So we've done the dodge tool to lighten up the eyes, and then we just did the sponge tool to take the red out. Let's go ahead and switch to now the burn tool. This is the hardest step of this process, and you can see how the edge of the eye is naturally a little bit darker. We want to enhance that a little bit. So we are going to use the burn tool, which is used to darken things. And we're going to come up here to the top. We're going to set our range to shadows. We want to tell Photoshop, hey, only darken things that are already a little bit dark. And again, we're going to set our exposure to about 8%. And we're going to come down here with a nice small brush, hardness set to 0. And we're going to come just around the outside of the eye and just darken that down just a little bit. This is pretty tricky, and it's going to take some time to get good at it to make your circle look normal. It's pretty easy to end up with a kind of a jonky looking circle. I don't know that jonky's not even a word. It's also pretty easy to overdo this, so don't do too much on this. So I'm going to switch to the other eye here. Darken down these edges just a smidge. If you start watching for this in movies and TV shows, you will start to see they do this all of the time. There you go. That just enhances that circle around the eye a little bit. Let's zoom out, check our before and after at this point here. And we're really making those eyes pop, look a lot better. All right, we're almost done. We got 3 more steps. Let's go ahead and switch back to the dodge tool. And you can see how the bottom half of the eye is a little bit brighter than the top half of the eye. We want to enhance that a little bit too. So let's go ahead and with our dodge tool, set to midtones, so with an exposure of about 8%. Let's do just a quick swipe down here on the bottom half of the eye. You can see I just brightened it up just a little bit. Do the same thing over here. Okay, just brighten that up a little bit. Now look at these white lights in the eye. These are called catch lights, and if you've got these, they really make your photo look a little bit better. They make the eyes really pop. So what we're going to do is with our dodge tool still selected, we're going to change our range to highlights. We're going to tell Photoshop, hey, ignore all this dark stuff. Only focus on the bright stuff for me, please. So I'm going to leave everything else the same, and I'm just going to brighten up those catch lights a little bit by just clicking and dragging over them. I don't even need to worry about making my brush smaller because Photoshop is ignoring anything that's dark, and it's only brightening things that are already bright because I set it to highlights up there at the top. So let's look at our before and after now. Look at those catch lights really starting to pop. Looking pretty good. Last thing we can do is come back to our sponge tool. Only this time instead of desaturate, we're going to choose saturate. We're going to set our flow to 20%. And we're going to come down and just this part that we just dodged to make brighter, we're going to just saturate that a little bit. We're going to enhance the colors on it. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm just going to do a little swoop, and that's it. This one is also pretty easy to overdo, so be careful. Just a little swoop to the left, to the right, and then a swoop to the left, and then we're done. Let's zoom out. Take a look at these eyes and see how they look before and after. So that's before. That's after. Now, the great part about doing this on its own layer is that when we get done, if we decide that it's a little too much, that it looks a little fake, we can always just come over here to our eyes layer and come up and change the opacity down a little bit to kind of blend them back together. And by lowering that down to about 75%, to me, that doesn't look too fake. It doesn't look too obvious that we've done anything in the eyes. So there you go. We've got quite the collection of layers here. We've softened the skin. We've retouched it, taken out any blemish. And now we've enhanced the eyes. We're really doing pretty well here. Okay, I've switched photos for this last step because I wanted to see some teeth in it. And I haven't done any of the retouching yet because I just wanted to show you this very last step. You can see I have a lot of little dust and stuff that needs to be cleaned off. This was not a very good scan. And I haven't done the eyes yet. But let's look at our last step. So we need one more action. So let's go ahead and create a new action. Make sure before you do that you've set the opacity of your eyes layer exactly where you want it. If you've lowered this down to 70 or 60 or wherever you decided to put it, that's fine, but just make sure you're happy with it because after this point we won't really be able to undo it without going back and redoing some steps. So let's record a new action. We're going to call this number 4, teeth. Press record. And once again, we're going to make sure we are on the eyes layer, and we are going to press Control, Shift, Alt, E. And that's going to make us a new layer. Let's double click on this bad boy right here where it says Layer 2. Change this to the word teeth so that we know what we did on this layer. And this step's pretty simple. All we're going to do is grab our sponge tool, which of course is hiding right here. You're an expert on that now. We're going to set this to desaturate. going to set our flow to about 20%. We're going to make sure vibrance is unchecked. This is very important. If you forget to do this, the teeth are going to look blue and ugly. So make sure vibrance is unchecked. Use a nice small soft edge brush. And teeth tend to look yellower than they really are in photos. And that does not mean that she likes to smoke and drink coffee all day long. It's just the way photos teeth usually turn out. With desaturate selected, we're just going to go over the teeth. Careful to stay off the gums and off the lips. And desaturate that yellow right out of the photo. And it's kind of hard to see what's happening, but so I'll show you the before and after here when I'm done. Make sure you get right here around the edges of the gums. That's kind of where it shows up a lot. Get all of the teeth. If you can see the bottom teeth, go ahead and do it. You would still do this even if they have braces. That's okay. And that looks pretty good. I've kind of done the whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn this layer on and off. Oh, you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to stop recording my action. So let's go ahead and press stop. You can see I have these three parts of the action that I don't want. So let's go ahead and just delete those. So I'm just going to click and drag that down to the garbage can. Drag that one down to the garbage can. And drag that one down to the garbage can. Now let's turn my teeth layer on and off. You can see the difference that made. It's very subtle. It's not super obvious, but we've whitened up those teeth. Really made them look nice. And that's it, you guys. If you get this far, you have done some pretty expert retouching and made your subject look pretty amazing.